Top of the good now to you, everyone. This is Daryl as a service. We're live finally with Office 365 Message Center the week there was. Thank you for your patience. Dan, I've got fiber so close to my property that I can smell it, but I can't connect to it. Not till May.
You could smell fiber?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it sounds very healthy.
Okay.
This fibrous sort of smell in food, but it's good.
Well,
thank you everyone for being patient as you've been waiting in the chat rooms. I'll just have a quick check to see who's there. We've got Liz, Dan. I know there was about 6 people waiting, so that's all good. Cool. Hey, this is the 31st episode of the Message Center. Yeah, we're rocking along.
Yes, we are.
And there's been a few things that we have seen appear in the Message Center, and definitely one that's been appeared that is not in the Message Center, but we think it's very important. And also on the show, we're going to be talking with Sarah Haase about a workforce that is potentially or definitely more adept to change. We'll check in with her for about 10 minutes or so. Cool. Dan, what's happening in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, I'm coming to you live from Middle Tennessee, the home of the epicenter of the flu. So we've got a flu epidemic going on. I do not have the flu. Well, at least I don't think I do yet. I was actually in St. Louis, Missouri this weekend at SharePoint Saturday, and maybe I've avoided it for a few days. So that's been my world. I actually did a couple of videos while I was there with a couple of experts in the field of Office 365, and we'll be posting those to the channel as well. So yeah, that's what's going on in my world.
Cool. It's often something I get a little jealous of with all the SharePoint Saturdays and various things that you guys can just travel a few hundred kilometers this way and then that way and this way, and you can be part of all these different communities. Again, part of the reason why I started this, so we can reach out across the world and connect with people. Anyway, on with the content. We aren't going to go through every message as we said last week. Rather than ticking through and saying next message, we're going to just check in on a few. We have a major update to look at, so we'll have a look at that as we go through. You will see there's some slight changes in the Message Center too that are trying to highlight things. Act by as this column that is kind of becoming more prevalent, and where you do have to do something about it by a certain date, or you definitely have to pay attention. We've got an exclamation mark and various dates. So we won't so much touch on the first message. We won't speak too much about it, but there's some change to the SharePoint Online pages and changing the default to Edge rather than IE10. So
and we talked about that.
Yeah, we did talk about that. And if you code that sort of stuff into your page, then be wary of that change. Maybe this one you could dive into because this is all about SharePoint. One of the reasons why orgs will use SharePoint is so they can find their stuff, make it more discoverable, and rather than sitting on a file server. So tell us about it, Dan.
Well, I think this is key, and I just had a conversation. I just got back to the studio from talking with a client. We're going to be doing helping them with their intranet rollout, and one thing that we talked about is site collections are kind of the new norm now, right? This is something that we've been talking about, kind of transitioning the community to when you're building out your sites, use site collections rather than subsites. And one thing using subsites got us was the search experience was good because the container for search has been site collections as that default experience. This, I think, is helping us bringing that global search making it easier for you to be able to search all your content is great when you combine it with, we're trying to be a flat structure with having site collections for all of your sites. And as well as, Microsoft's doing that as well with every Office 365 group, you get this SharePoint site collection. It's not a subsite. So this improved search experience is going to just enable you to be able to adopt that easier with having that flat structure of all your site collections.
Yeah, it's really important, some of these changes, apart from them standing on their own and giving us a better experience, they are positioning towards the strategy of having that flat structure. And we see some more changes like that coming through too, like the one from last week with OneNote, where when you create a new notebook in your channel, it's creating its own file, and that's positioning for private channels, I believe. So those sorts of changes are really good. All right, and we do have another one that we'll talk about as we go through here too. Now, the general availability of forms, that's appeared as a major update, something that we all need to know about. There are a number of organizations that are using forms, sometimes in mostly not so much of a official capacity. They might use a heftier tool like MailChimp or the like to reach out and get other capabilities. But Forms is certainly fitting maybe 40 or 50% of the needs, and it's giving us a capability as an end user to think, well, I need to ask some questions about this, or I need to gather some feedback. How do I get this quickly? Now, what experience have you had with Forms in customers or in your own usage there, Dan?
Yeah, the forms, I think, is another example of how Microsoft is rolling out functionality that, it's kind of an MVP, a minimal viable product. And it's just another showcase of that, of I have some ability to create these forms. And I think for me, it introduces yet another when to use what kind of conversation that people are going to be asking with Power Apps and forms and Excel survey, all of those kind of things are when to use what. It's another conversation that we're going to be in. I haven't used it a whole lot in enterprise customers, but I think it is another tool that we're going to be having that conversation about of when should we use this, and I think people need to be ready to have that conversation. So get ready, start using it, playing around with it a little bit to get used to it.
I'll tell you one audience that is definitely making good use of it is education. And there have been some tweaks there to make it easier for them to run tests out of forms. So, it's not to say that it's sidestepping any other more official way of taking tests, but it's providing that way that you can embed it maybe into a OneNote and take just a summative test of how have people, how have students, absorb this knowledge, and they can go back and have a look at how their results have been just very quickly. So Forms is generally available, and it's good to see that. I'll just check in here with some of the people on chat. All right, so we've got Liz was making a comment about site collections, and just avoiding subsites. Stephen Collier, he is happy about Forms because he's keen to see it reduce the need for SurveyMonkey. So, when products like Forms are part of your subscription, there's less of a need to subscribe to other services. If it's fitting, 40-50% of the needs, and then you can just use the other products for the heftier tasks, that's great. All right, continuing along with a couple of other messages. We've got... won't talk too much about this, but we do get a monthly message to say, or to roll up, what are some of the changes in Office Pro Plus as it's been rolled out.
Right.
So if you are on targeted release, where you have set yourself up to get those feature updates every month, then you will you'll be able to see these and relate to that. If you're on your deferred release where you're getting it twice a year, then of course that's not going to come till a bit later on. But yeah, so we'll leave you up to you to check out some of those changes. Right, SharePoint News and its aggregation into Microsoft Teams chat. Look, I think that news, I know we hear this, the democratization of phrase a lot, but I believe it's the democratization of being able to give people a way to talk more about their stories and what they're doing within an organization. So I've been really quite excited to see news in SharePoint become easier and more available for people to create these articles. And here's another integration point of being able to bring that into the chat in Microsoft Teams. Now, do you see news being used much in your customers, Dan?
Yes, I think it's one of the Microsoft has done a great job at promoting news when talking about modern sites, and so it's actually one of the first things and it's easy to use. So it's one of the first things people are using. And I think when we get to the normal of this hubifying, when we have the hubs and we're able to hubify sites and bring them together and that rolls up news to that hub site, I think it'll be even more because it's more like power to users to be able to announce that information, to get that information rolled up, and it'll be easier for them to do that. So I think even more so when we're doing hubifying and getting everybody engaged to be able to roll up that news.
You do see where that news does roll up. Just one place really, and I don't think it's a place that we visit often yet. But it's the SharePoint home where you can see your followed sites and the ones that you've most recently visited, and so you have your news along the top. You'll only see news from the sites that you're a member of, so that's fine. That's two. But yes, when it is brought into that hub experience, it's going to be great. Now, one of the reasons that I think we need to encourage the use of SharePoint News is because it needs to replace those long emails that are really quite restricted with what you can do within formatting and what sort of content you can bring through. It makes a lot more sense to create a news article, a news piece, and drop all the different kinds of multimedia content and pictures and videos that you might have taken and references to other resources, make it into a page and then just refer to it in that email so that we get a richer experience of the content. We get our news out there, and you'll also in the background be able to catch how many people have viewed this. Depending on what you do and maybe using some third-party tools, you could get a lot more data about how it's being used.
I agree. I agree with that. That helps with adoption as well. With people, they want to drive. I've worked with several organizations who that's what they do. They send emails out every week. Here's the newsletter, and instead of, if you want people to get that richer experience, to be able to have the audio and video and even pictures, an email with a ton of pictures it's going to be big, and so. Give a little blurb about what's going on, via email, and then say, go read the whole thing. I think that's the best way to go when you're transitioning from that email to using something, a content management system. Like you're using SharePoint that way.
If you are transitioning, away from using email as your primary collaboration experience internally, then that's what this announcement comes in. That with Microsoft Teams, if you've chosen that as your collaboration and comms experience, then you can bring that news into Microsoft Teams and talk about it. So it becomes part of that conversation stream. And remember, Teams is designed all around the conversation experience primarily. We talk about stuff, documents, data, Power BI boards, all that sort of thing. And SharePoint News is now added to that.
Well, if it's going to... Teams is that hub for teamwork. That's the kind of the tagline, right? If it truly is a hub for teamwork, then bringing news aggregation in there is just another step in making that happen.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So that seems to be, actually it doesn't really give us so much of a date. Let's have a look-see here.
Next few days.
Next few days. Okay, that's a nice
Yep.
rounded out. So expect it this week. Be looking out for it. And, on that topic, when you do see stuff like this and you watch the show, feel free to share with us your thoughts about, how it's impacted your organization, what the uptake has been, whether people like it, don't like it, whether they're using it. What do you think as an IT pro as well? And, just drop in hashtag RE365 on that tweet and we'll get engaged in that conversation. Sure. Yeah, welcoming to Sebastian as well. There's a few people that have joined us as we go through the show. That's awesome. Look, I'll tell you what, let's check in with the quick recording or interview that I had with Sarah Haase. Now, Sarah's tuned in a few times on the show. She works in the user adoption space. She's worked with a couple of large companies, and she also runs the Twin Cities SharePoint Saturday. Am I right?
She's on the planning committee. Yeah, she's on the group organization group for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll flick over to that video, and she's got some interesting things to say about user adoption and generational differences. We'll cut to that now. All right, this is Daryl as a Service. We are talking with Sarah Haase.
That's pretty close, Sarah Haase.
All right, yeah, not too bad. I do try and pride myself in saying people's names correctly, even if it is
an unpronounceable name,
Badapachi or something like that, because it's about honouring people the way that they're supposed to be addressed. So good to meet you, Sarah, and thank you for reaching out and actually being part of the audience and watching our shows. I am not shy of saying hello to people on the virtual street, so to speak, and that's why I reached out, because I'm interested in your story and what you've got to say around your role in using Office 365. So tell me a little about what you do.
Right. So I tend to work for large organizations, helping them roll out Office 365, and then really helping to drive change management, user adoption, user education for the Office 365 technologies to really help your business line users be able to adopt the technologies, understand how they can leverage them to build new productivity practices and behaviors, and then reinforce those behaviors to try and help them engage in different and unique ways based on their business needs and their desired business outcomes.
Wow, and that's exactly the kind of line of work I'm in, so I think that's why we connected quite well. When we had a chat about what we were going to talk about, it was just like, yeah, nodding, exactly. So one of the things you said that was quite an interesting challenge is that the workforce, of course, is getting younger, and we have heard this talked about with Microsoft and the kind of tools that they're offering for communication. There's also talk that was a little ways back about, do we still need email? Now, your challenge is, I guess, how do you help this new generation to transition into a workforce with the different tools? So tell us a bit about how you're addressing that, or what sort of thoughts have you got around that challenge?
Well, it's definitely something that we look at in terms of the technology capabilities. For example, if you look at OneNote or you look at Microsoft Teams, even Microsoft Flow, and how it compares to more of an if this then that capability set. Different audiences in terms of different types of users from a technology capability and understanding and a desire to reach in and understand technology. Different audiences and users in our organizations react differently to these new tools, but also just chronologically speaking, audiences in different age groups are going to react differently to those tools. So when we look at experiential tools like Microsoft Teams, the attractive bit about that is its ability to present an experience that unifies a lot of the capabilities, right? So you've got your chat in there now with the Skype integration coming into Teams, the ability to work on your OneNote notebooks right within Teams, manage your files and all within that experience. Different audiences, and in particular, what I see when I am working with some of our millennial audiences is that really speaks to them, as well as just the mobility capabilities that you have in terms of all of the mobile apps and their level of integration. And for a lot of our organizations, that's a critical business need because our users don't want to just have to work on bring their own device. They don't want to just be limited to working on their company device. They want to be able to do their work from wherever they are, and they want to make sure that they have access to all the mobile apps to be able to do that work. And their vision of tools and technologies is different. So when you take an app like Planner and the ability to manage sprints, manage tasks, have them relate to one another in a visual way, that speaks differently to different types of users, especially those, I'm going to say I don't want to label it just millennial, but as we look at the younger generations in the workforce, they just have different expectations of how tools function and what the visual experience of those tools is than some of our workers who have been used to email for 20 years or 25 years.
There is a lot to consider, isn't there, with change and with audiences. And dare I say it, at the moment, we're in a transitional phase where the younger audiences that do come into the workforce are still being expected to, you've got to get in line, you've still got to use email, you've still got to use certain things. And it's almost like it feels a step back, and they have to train themselves into a habit of checking these different spaces. So that is quite a challenge. And conversely, when you're moving into tools like Teams and something that's more unified and fluid, how is there any overwhelmment that the older generation might feel shifting from traditional email and file share and other spaces? What do you see?
Exactly, and these individual business teams, so when you have a departmental team, you have an ad hoc project team, you have cross-functional teams, they're going to have people that represent from all different ages and technology adoption capability levels. So then it's even more interesting in how you get them to actually share information and work collaboratively together. Because some of those users, even if you're looking at co-authoring of documents, that's a very different level of trust that people have for being willing to trust that the technology is not going to lose their changes, right? And so how we go about engaging these business teams, it's always interesting because you really need to focus on how the teams work together, how the teams desire to work together, the personalities of the teams, and then the business needs and outcomes that they have, and then recommend Office 365 capability sets that seem to best match where we think that they can evolve to. Right? And so for one team, that might be a Microsoft Teams experience. For another team, it might be, a SharePoint online site experience, right? So it depends uniquely on the team, on the need and the personality of the team and the personalities of the people within.
Yeah, I really like that you make that point because we can get sucked into marketing and the next shiny new thing, but we really have to step back and say, how does our team, what is the makeup of our team and how do they communicate and work together? Look, just to tie this back to the Message Center and change itself, thinking of the constant change, the constant update and the incremental changes we see in Office 365, do you see a difference in the way that audiences are reacting to that change, that one is more capable of, I wouldn't say capable, but used to change, and how do they cope with that?
Yes, some of them are more used to change than not, but one of the things that I always go in when I'm talking to our users, whether it's as part of a large user group meeting or it's small group meetings, is just talking to them about their smart devices and in their personal lives, right, how they accommodate different kinds of change. And most of our users, if I go in and talk to them, most of them are at least somewhat familiar, even if they're not on Facebook, for example, they're somewhat familiar with what a news feed would look like and that experience can change. This past weekend, Facebook rolled out an update to my phone, and now comments in my Facebook thread look very different. They're visually demarcated differently than they were before. That's a change moment. I had a reaction to that change, and I oftentimes find that talking to people about things that they can understand in their personal lives and then relating that back to a work context really helps to ground it and make it seem not quite as scary. But it's also important, if a big change is coming through from a Message Center perspective, my team has to message that change in a variety of ways for our different types of users because they want to receive that information differently. And many of them are going to assimilate that information differently and over very different time periods. So if there's a big change coming, I might share that out on Yammer, for example, and some users might be keen to look at what are the latest Microsoft Office 365 updates, and they're going to go out and immediately check out whatever the newest update is to OneDrive or Microsoft Flow, and they're going to be excited about that. Other users are going to learn when suddenly something is in their path that is new to them that they visually haven't seen before. Or when they hear it over the cue ball from someone next to them. So it's being okay with the notion that you're never going to be able to educate all of your users at the same time and in the same way. So multiple channels and a longer timeline that fits the needs and capability sets of the users is important. And being public and open in a variety of channels.
Right, so in your organization, or even recommending to other organizations, are you making use of targeted release for a set group of people versus the bulk of your audience or the bulk of the organization are on the 2 times a year, 3 times a year changes? Is that how you use it? Or is everyone on getting the newest, latest, greatest?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to determine from a company culture perspective what is going to be the best fit. We only have a limited set of options, right, with Office 365, but making sure that you make that decision strategically, that you take a look at the audience of your company culture, their personality, how they assimilate change, how you're going to protect for that change and foster that change is important. So that way we can try and steer as best we can and educate as best we can what the practice is.
Great. Yeah, well, thank you, Sarah. It's a quick bite of opinions from another person who also faces change, has some interaction with the Office 365 Message Center, and certainly the results of that Message Center. So thank you, Sarah, and I see we can follow you on Sarah Haase on Twitter. Anywhere else that we could check out what you're up to?
If you want to check out my blog, you can find it on my Twitter profile. It's blog.splibrarian.com.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And we'll catch you again sometime on the live shows.
All right. Thanks, Sarah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah, for that great little thought and interview as well. And we're going to be enjoying bringing those sorts of things to the show as well. Just checking in with some of the comments there, Dan. I thought it was quite some good conversation going on there. And thanks, Sarah, for joining us too. So I like how Stephen pointed out it's not the workforce that's getting older, it's us.
Yes, well, it's kind of a generation. If you think of the workforce as an entity, it's just generations moving through that workforce, right? So the average age isn't really, I do think the average age is increasing a little bit. I think people are working longer, but it's just things change as we, as the years go through, with the interactions with the different generations. So.
Yeah, look, Sarah makes a good point too in the chat about connecting people with their different preferences and their, tech knowledge. That it's not about the cookie cutter approach. If I can borrow some thoughts from a recent blog post that I think she published today, that you do have to customize this, and it does mean that you need to be inclusive of all generations and find ways to connect them to create that community and get them to help each other across the communication gaps and keeping people up to speed with things.
Yeah.
So there's some really good thoughts there, Sarah, and thank you very much for joining us.
Right,
so let's just finish off, Dan, with a thought or two around something that wasn't in the Message Center, because we have reached the end of our messages there. There was a big one, and I saw it being talked about by Joanne Klein. And what do you think I'm talking about here? It's still something on the SharePoint lines?
Yeah, so and it's funny because I was actually looking at another blog post that Joanne had posted about a different topic, but for the movement of content, of files, we've been able to, in the new modern experience in SharePoint Online, been able to move a file in the folders, right? So we can move it around and pretty easily on a site, but now being able to move moving content between sites, site collections, OneDrive, etc. natively, I think is a huge deal.
Look, let's take it back to that first experience you had when you shifted from a file server to SharePoint, and where you were able to just copy and paste documents, and then you got questions from people as they shifted to SharePoint. Can I just copy and paste these documents to that new place that I want them to go to? Oh, no. And this is one of the arguments that people had for we need to have things stay on-prem because we need to connect map drives in the background so that people can still have that file explorer experience. Because we do need to shift files. Files do go from that space in your OneDrive or a home drive, so to speak, where you're authoring something on your own. You take it to a space to get some feedback from people, and then you're pushing it to another space for publishing.
Right.
And so the big thing about this, which isn't in the Message Center yet, maybe we'll see a blog post, but it is that I think there is a blog post actually.
There is a blog post, yes.
There is a blog post, yeah. Maybe if you could sort of drop that in the chat somewhere, I could
Sure.
bring it up on screen. And it is that you can copy these documents between site collections. Now, this is not something we could do earlier. We had to do everything in one site collection, and the modern experience had made it nicer for us to move or copy, content between document libraries. In fact, I think it's the move feature that is the key one, because it brings across not just the document but all the version history and everything that's happened with that document. Now I'm just recalling what was in that blog post. Not only is it the version history, but the metadata as well that might have been attached, and I forget what it does with metadata if the fields aren't there. I think that they still encourage you to just make sure it drops them. Yeah.
I'm not finding the link, so if anybody else could find that link, it's in Tech Community. But I'm not finding it. So
that's all right. We'll find it and we'll drop it in the comments on the
video
afterwards.
Itself. Yeah.
But I think that one happened at the end of the week. It was around about Friday, US time. Might have even been in the afternoon. So here's a present for your weekend. Make your end users and your organizations aware of this one, because we're getting more and more capabilities in SharePoint that make it such a friendlier experience to use it for files and for collaboration. And it's not just feels like a foreign thing anymore. So then when you are putting all that effort into building an intranet with either out of the box or third-party products, these areas of friction are being removed bit by bit, slowly but surely, and that's a great one there. That's come in. Did you notice anything else there, Dan, this week?
No, I think there's some announcements about Mac clients and such, but no, that was the biggest thing that I saw. And I'll tweet that out because I can't obviously put URLs in the chat here in YouTube. But the Chris McNulty is the one that put the blog post out about that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I found it.
Cool.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's a wrap, people. Do continue that conversation with the hashtag we're now using. That's hashtag #re365. Tune in next week. If you do see up in the top right-hand corner, I've got a little info icon button. If you click on that, you'll see the next episode is all scheduled and ready to go. So make sure you click on that, subscribe, and flick on the alert button so that you'll be reminded half an hour out when we're about to go live. We're doing various things as a team, so we're looking forward to bringing you some more content. Thanks everyone for tuning in and being part of the chat, and we'll see you again all next week. Catch you later.
See you, everybody.